Hello everyone again. Welcome to the Next Gen Locations webinar. I'm Vincent Rofast. I'm a director at Ocio Global. Ocio, which is a consulting firm, specialized in investment and location strategies. And so today, the topic of this webinar is around the future of European GBS and shared service centers locations. And we have 1 hour, to cover this topic with, of course, a panel discussion and a great set of, VIP guests to talk about that. But before we discuss those, locations dynamics across Europe, I think it's good to have a bit of recap and introduction just to set the scene, to give some context and background about what this is that we're talking about and why we're talking about that. So maybe we can start immediately. So first, this webinar is actually the first round of a series of webinars that we'll be doing around this topic of GBS and shared service centers locations. So today, obviously, as you know, it's about the European market and the location dynamics in Europe for shared service centers and GBS. But we're going to have some other sessions. The next one will be about the US market, because quite interestingly, we're seeing very interesting new trends and dynamic happening in the US. In the US itself. So it's not about Latin America. This time it's going to be about the US market itself. And the next one, which will happen in Q3 of 2025, will be about the Asia Pacific market and how those trends are developing for GBS in that region. So about some key figures just to set the scene about the GBS and shared service center market in Europe. So the first thing we wanted to remind to everyone is that Europe is a very key and critical market for this industry, because it accounts for almost 1/3 of the global GBS market. So Europe is home to 1/3 approximately of all shared service centers and GBS centers in the world. So it's quite massive. It's really something huge. Another key highlights from this industry is that in a recent SSON survey, we saw that more than half of companies are actually revisiting their GBS footprint. So this is something which is happening right now, which has been happening for years and even decades. The market is very competitive, as we're going to see. So that generates and trigger constant questions around how to best optimize the GBS footprints for companies. What we are going to see also during this and discuss during this session is that, of course, Central and Eastern Europe is still at the forefront and has been from the start at the very forefront of the GBS industry in Europe. But very interestingly, we're seeing new locations, emerging locations popping up, for example, in the south of Europe. So it's going to be interesting to discuss that. And then one last, key highlight. There are clearly, some big challenges around the development of this industry. Challenges and opportunities, should I say, around the adoption of AI, which is also massive and which is having an impact on location strategies, on the operations of GBS themselves. So we're going to discuss that and see what's this impact and how does that what does that mean in terms of location dynamics. Also, there is another question which is really on the rise around how to balance GBS organizations around outsourcing model versus a captive model to find the right flexibility and the best way to operate on the market. Some also conversations that we're going to have around geopolitics and how this is impacting also those location dynamics. So, plenty of things of those trends happening in the market and which are transforming on a permanent basis, on an ongoing basis, the dynamics of this industry and the location competition for those industries behind that. So maybe we can move to the next one. Yes, so this one, so on the map of GBS and shared service centers in Europe. So basically two things here. First, as you can see, it's a highly competitive market. So competition is very strong in the market to attract and retain and develop those quite strategic activities right now. And we should have in mind that so it all started approximately 25 years ago with a big push and move towards Central Eastern Europe, with locations that are today very established, very mature with this industry towards Central Europe especially. And what we've seen over the past 25 years is the new locations emerging on that market. And what we're seeing really is a shift towards the further east and further south for new locations, so more emerging ones, which are here in purple. So it's quite interesting to see that those new players are coming on the market, and it will be interesting to see how they are positioning on the market and competing with the rest of the locations. The same questions apply to those very established and mature locations where there is still a lot happening. So interesting to see, with different stages of maturity levels, different size of those locations, how they are competing in the market and how they are seeing and preparing for the future about and how to attract again and retain those type of quite strategic activities. On the next one, yes. So one last word on location drivers, and so really, what are the parameters really driving location decisions when it comes to making an investment decision or an expansion decision with GBS or shared service centers activities. So very, in a nutshell, it's always a trade-off, a very complex trade-off that you need to find between three main type of parameters. The first one being cost, probably, because, after all, it's very much about optimizing, cost through those strategic operations. So trade-off between cost, between operations as well. And as we all know, and as I'm sure we're going to discuss, the race for talent here is really, really, a sensitive question, and has always been. So we're going to see, how that works, how those, locations are trying to, provide the right supply of skills, being able to also retain, those skills and still yet managing, the cost and such. And then the third categories of parameters is risk. No doubt that over the past, 5 years, the world has really changed, and the number and the nature of the risk has really increased for European locations, including geopolitical risk that we're going to address probably. So we're going to see how that plays out in location decisions and location dynamics for those operations. So that was just to set the scene. I hope I was not too long. And Loic, I'm gonna over to you to introduce our great panel of experts that will be talking about that today. And thank you very much. Have a good session, everyone.
Thank you, Vincent, for this introduction. I think it was indeed a good warm-up, a good kickoff to this session, and you highlighted a couple of topics that we will discuss today with our panelists. So let me maybe introduce indeed our three speakers today. Maybe just a short word about myself. So I'm working for OCO as well. I'm in charge of the location strategy for OCO, but less important than myself, more important than myself, our three guests today that I will shortly introduce to you guys. So first of all, let me welcome Giorgio Vente. Welcome, Giorgio.
Good morning.
Giorgio. Ciao, Giorgio. So Giorgio is coming from Italy, from Napoli. Giorgio is actually having two hats. one being an honored professor at the University of Napoli, and the second hat being a scientific director for the Apple Academy in Napoli. And Giorgio will be bringing his perspective around, obviously, what's happening in the south of Europe. And Vincent highlighted that it's part of a booming region in Europe. And obviously, perspective around what's happening in between universities, in between GBS centers, and what collaboration could be implemented, obviously on the talent side. So welcome, Giorgio. Our second speaker is actually Laura, who is coming from Vilnius in Lithuania. Laura is heading the Alterdomus GBS. Alterdomus, it's a financial company HQ'd in Luxembourg, and one of their GBS operations is actually located then in Lithuania. Today, it's around 400 people, right, Laura, that you are managing in Vilnius. Before that, you've been working as well for the Lithuanian government to help attract GBS into the country. So you'll be bringing your perspective, obviously, on heading a GBS, and from the inside, I would say, around what's happening, in terms of, the latest trends. We mentioned a bit about AI, about geopolitics. I'm sure we will discuss all of that with you, Laura. And last but not least, let me welcome Katarzyna Kasia from Poland. From Randstad, Poland. Actually, Kasia is the National Sales and Key Account Management at Randstad, Poland. Obviously, when we speak about the shared service center market in Europe, we always kind of have Poland in the loop or in the conversation. So Kasia will be obviously bringing a view around what's happening in the biggest market, the biggest GBS market in Europe, being Poland. And obviously, with a strong view around talent and labor, the Randstad point of view on this. So welcome, Kasia. So if that's okay, let's start this conversation. We have two main topics that we want to discuss today. One is around the future of location. The other one is around the future of GBS. Obviously, we want to link these two topics together. To kick off this panel session, let me ask maybe the first question to you, Laura. As you are, I would say, the only one here heading a GBS. So can you maybe share with us to kick off this conversation, what's the main challenges that you've been facing over the past few years as growing your activity here in Vilnius? I know the center has been ramping up quite rapidly over the past few years. So would be interesting to hear about the main challenges as part of this journey, and how do you see as well the coming months or coming years, in your growth plan?
Super. Thanks a lot, Loic. Thanks for introduction. I see that you're still are not attempting to pronounce my surname, so maybe we just need a little bit more time and practice on that too. But on a more serious note, I think there are a couple of key moments when it comes to challenging areas, both for us as an organization, but overall probably relevant for GBS and non-GBS organizations in the market as well. First and foremost, it's probably the change on talent preferences, I would say. So after all of the disruptions of COVID, the pandemic, the lockdown, and now a little bit more recently, the war in Ukraine, I would say that people are reevaluating, especially the younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, in terms of what it means for them to have a job, and what is, how important the job for them is within their preferences. So initially, especially 10 years ago, we would see that the key priority for people was, job stability, really good salary, international environment. Now, especially for their younger guys, we see that they are seeking more purpose. They want to have a really good work-life balance. And for some, especially GBS organizations, which can be really, driven by the volume work, can be really challenging, especially those who are maybe led by older generations who are used to certain models of work from time to time. And this is not specific to Lithuania. We've encountered this throughout other locations as well. people are sometimes leaving the work without anything lined up in the future. So they're not leaving the GBS organizations for a competitor, but they're leaving to achieve their life purpose. They want to explore something different, change their environment, you know, go to and discover themselves in India somewhere, etc., in higher numbers than before. So for some organizations, especially who might not be able to provide incredibly purposeful work or incredible work content, this can be a new challenge, and we need to find new ways how to deal with that. On top of that, which is probably more relevant for Central Eastern Europe, is the kind of lower wage arbitrage that we see compared to how it used to be back, you know, 10 years ago. Let's say a good decade ago, it used to be the case that typically GBSs were competing against other GBSs in the market, basically international companies, good pay, stability, as already mentioned, and international work, big projects. But now more and more we see that the competition environment is extended to big startups, local companies that, especially in Central Eastern Europe, grew up to be as big and as important, and sometimes maybe a little bit even more purpose-driven, not as driven obviously by wage arbitrage as it used to be. So this is kind of again a little bit of shift in a competitive environment that we see over here. And kind of probably one of the other biggest elephants in the room is the geopolitics that you've already mentioned. Obviously, the war in Ukraine, the instability, especially for the new guys exploring, setting up new operations in the region. It's probably really hard, especially to more risk-averse companies, to make the case for the board that Central Eastern Europe is a location where you want to put a critical operation for your group, etc. However, even with all of those headwinds in mind, it's important to recognize that still, as you alluded, and as Vincent alluded in his introduction, Central Eastern Europe has this critical mass of especially top senior leadership who've done this for GBS organizations for a number of different industries according to different drivers, and that must not be discounted as well. If you're looking for that stability for top key experienced talent, Eastern Europe is still the location to find those guys who will start up your operation, basically, especially if this is not a skill set that you already have in the company, and especially if it's the first time you're looking to establish this kind of operation.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Very, very interesting already, and a couple of stuff I'm sure we will deep dive in this conversation. I think I will use as a transition what you mentioned as elephant in the room, being the conflict and the war in Ukraine. I think it's now 3 years that this war has started. Obviously, I would say one of the EU country most affected by it is Poland, with this common border with Ukraine. Kasia, I think the next question will be for you. You understood. Can you maybe relate a bit on how this conflict has affected the GBS market in Poland? And now what's interesting is that we have 3 years of track record, if I may. So you can maybe feedback us as well on how this has impacted the market, and what's your take on that?
Sure. Thank you, Loic, as well for the introduction. I'll give you my perspective on Poland, but also in general on the GBS market. So when the war in Ukraine started, some companies in business services sector paused their investment decisions due to geopolitical uncertainties. Some of those investments returned to Poland, some not. However, many companies continued their planned transitions and even expanded their operations, recognizing Poland's strategic importance in the region. Investors became convinced that Poland is a safe and attractive country due to skilled talent availability and low employment costs. In 2023, Poland has been ranked as the most attractive investment location among countries in Central and Eastern Europe, with nearly 93% of respondents indicating that they would choose Poland again for their operations. So 3 years after the start of the war in Ukraine, the GBS sector in Poland has demonstrated resilience and sustained growth. By the end of Q1 2024, the employment in sector reached nearly 457,000 of employees, making actually a 3.8% year-on-year increase, which actually gave 7% of total enterprise employment in Poland. From the candidates' perspective, the GBS sectors and expansions offered diverse employment opportunities. We mentioned that actually, I mentioned about the influx of skilled professionals from Ukraine, well, but also Belarus, and it helped fill talent gaps in the Polish labor market. Also, it impacted on further sectors' growth. And many companies from Ukraine and Belarus relocated their operations to Poland, particularly in the IT, SSE, and construction sectors. From an organizational and operational perspective, companies have faced challenges such as an increased cost, supply chain disruptions, and decrease in sales and revenues due to the conflict. It, of course, impacted GBS operations, especially in finance and procurement, but also logistics. And GBS centers have had to adapt to changing costs and supply chain delays, often speeding up the need for process improvements and cost reduction strategies. I also wanted to say about how the GBS centers reduce the cost. So they do that this by automating repetitive tasks with AI and robotic process automation, optimizing process and moving some functions to lower cost locations, especially back office functions. Many are shifting to cloud solutions to cut IT expenses and using, of course, hybrid work models to save on office space. In summary, while the war in Ukraine has presented challenges, the GBS sector in Poland has managed to sustain growth. The sector has overcome challenges and adapted to new labor market dynamics. There has been also a shift toward digitalization, increased focus on risk management, and diversification on operations. Therefore, the GBS sector in Poland remains still attractive area for investment and employment.
Thank you, Kasia, for this perspective. A couple of topics that we will continue to discuss as well on AI, on digitization and automation in a couple of minutes. But before we dig into this more, I would say, organizational topics, to close, if I may, this I would say geopolitical conversation and how risk became more and more important in some decisions of investors and company. I would be actually interested to get your views on that, Giorgio. So you are the one further away, I would say, from this conflict, being located in Italy. And actually, one of the takeaway of this report is that we put a bit the south of Europe on the spotlight, and obviously geopolitical reasons can be one of the rationale for this attractiveness as well of Southern Europe. So we'd be interested to get your thought on first of all this geopolitical aspect, if you see that as a criteria of importance when, for example, ramping up this Apple activity, and then obviously on a more broader view, how do you see the new emergence, I would say, of Southern Europe and of Napoli in particular, which is growing in that sense. So happy to get your view and your thought on that.
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I mean, let me say that, of course, we are in Europe are very concerned about the situation in Ukraine. But I mean, when we talk about geopolitics, we should be taking into account several other factors. I mean, for example, the increasing tension between the US and China, that it's an important factor. The new Trump administration that will be surely imposing major restriction on visa. And the fact that, for example, in the US market, there is always a major talent shortage that cannot be solved by just taking into account the number of managers and engineers that are grown up inside from the local talent pool. Okay, so I guess that Europe has a major opportunity here. And I do believe that the southern part of Europe can bring some more value to this market, can bring new solutions. Remember that I was reading, looking at your slides, and of course there is this major attention to factors like costs and access to talents. But to me, I see more and more the cost factor reducing as an importance, just because the cost is just a variable factor. And in an open market, talents can flow away. If they don't find, a reasonable way or a good pay. And this is happening, by the way. There are, talents are going more and more in places where they can get better pays, of course. So I do believe that we in Southern Europe can work more on the talent access, the talent pool. Also, an interesting factor is the impact of the attrition rate that are shown inside companies in Southern Europe that usually are much lower than in other areas of Europe. Just to give you an example, in Napoli, one of the major players here is Accenture, and Accenture is showing here attrition rate lower than 7%. It's a very low level, and compared to other Accenture sites. And of course, we have other factors that are very important. The first one is accessibility. Sites must be easy accessible from all over the world. And for example, Napoli has a very good airport with more than 120 locations reachable directly, and that are all spread from in Europe and also internationally, with direct connections to the US and the Gulf area. And also, one factor that for us is quite nice, it's the quality of life. The fact that, if you want to attract talents, young talents, and you want them to enjoy the work, to enjoy their presence on the job, the quality of life is a even more important factor. And it has been said before by Laura. It is more and more important and interesting that young generation are coming back to work. They are more interested in finding a good job. But what we mean by a good job is made of several factors. And for example, innovation, the capability of growing inside a company with training, with proper training, of course pay, that's an important factor, but also working on interesting project, and of course the quality of life. And in this sense, Europe and Southern Europe can give very good satisfaction to these talents.
Thank you. Thank you, Giorgio. A very interesting takeaway. Let me maybe jump on something you said to ask you a question, Kasia. So Giorgio mentioned, about talent shortage in some part of the world, in the US in particular, about the fact that this is a global market as well, and that we see that talent can move easily to get a better pay. What we see as well, and this is one of the output from COVID, is that talent can move jobs without moving location, and in particular working for some of the US companies sometime on with a better pay than what they could get in Europe. So you see where my question is coming, and I would like to get your thought around how these new ways of working, because it's been a bit stop and go depending on the companies and the sector and the activities, but how these new ways of working between remote working, hybrid working has been impacting the choice of a location, and how do you see this model being implemented in 2025 with your clients in the GBS sector?
Sure, of course. Many companies are now considering a variety of factors when selecting cities for new locations, for investments in the GBS sector. In Poland, and flexible working arrangements like hybrid and remote work models play a key role in this decision-making process. So first of all, the companies gain the opportunity to tap into talent from much more distant locations, as you already provided an example. So a shared service center, for instance, in Warsaw could hire employees from other European countries and attract talent for smaller cities with Warsaw level salaries without requiring them to relocate. And we can see that trend in Poland. The hybrid and remote work has encouraged businesses to explore locations beyond the traditionally preferred major cities like Warsaw, Kraków, or Wrocław. This shift isn't only about accessing a broader talent pool, but also about reducing the operational cost and still maintaining high-level services. This trend is particularly visible in IT and BPO sector, where companies were establishing over the last few years operations in smaller cities to leverage their local expertise and cost advantages. For example, Katowice, Łódź, Poznań, and Gdańsk. I'll be actually mentioning some cities in Poland. Those cities were seeing an increase in investments in the last few years, driven by the availability of highly skilled workforce. At competitive labor costs, and but also attractiveness in terms of employee work-life balance and living affordability. Thanks to remote work, for instance, and that's something that we can see more and more happening, Kraków and Katowice are becoming an increasingly connected talent pool. With just a 15-minute drive between them, professionals living in between can work for companies in both cities, boosting recruitment opportunities and knowledge exchange. And similar dynamics we can see between Łódź, Warsaw, and Lublin and Warsaw. In the recent years, Tier 3 cities in Poland, such as Bydgoszcz, Lublin, Rzeszów, and Szczecin, have become also attractive. For instance, in Lublin, we had number of investments among IT investors, and that actually impacted on rapid development. Similarly in Rzeszów. However, when choosing the location of the new GBS for the GBS, that's not only actually one factor that is taken into account, but also it depends what are the processes that are being transferred. For instance, also investment scale and growth timeline. A strong employer branding strategy is also key to attracting talent, even in non-traditional locations, ensuring alignment with business goals. So in Poland, actually, we've seen in the last years a rapid organizational growth. There were many investments that were actually ramping up to 300, 400 employees in a relatively short time. But now the focus has shifted from headcount to quality, attracting advanced processes like data analysis and R&D. And this trend drives companies to larger cities for access to experienced talent. While hybrid work adds flexibility, factors like infrastructure, accessibility, and industry clusters also shape location decisions. Warsaw, for instance, is a financial hub that attracts investors. Kraków has a great educational potential, and that makes those two locations prime locations for shared service centers. Just also one insight to show how important the flexibility in work location is important. That actually comes from our annual Global Work Monitor. While only 12% of HR leaders in Poland are confident that their organizations have achieved the optimal balance between hybrid and remote work, the majority recognize significant business benefits in maintaining remote work capabilities. the top rated advantages are enhanced employer attractiveness, increased employee productivity, and improvements in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also better employee health and well-being. In terms of the future trends and next actually hotspots for GBS in Poland, I think tier 2 cities like Katowice, Rzeszów, Łódź, and Lublin will be, and actually they will continue to be attractive, and these cities are set to benefit from ongoing investments in infrastructure, technology, and talent pools. Additionally, government support and regional development programs will further incentivize businesses to set up GBS centers, making these cities strategic locations for GBS centers in the next years.
Thank you, Kasia, for your insight and your takeaway on this. Maybe next question for you, Laura. We started to move from location to organization, I would say. Next question for you, Laura, would be around what would be on top of your agenda for 2025, 2026. There are a couple of stuff that we are already mentioned, you know, around way of working, digital transformation, increase of value, AI, which is obviously the buzzword, you know, in this environment. So, can you tell us a bit more around how do you see your organization moving, you know, in the coming months, coming years, and obviously how this will affect, you know, the day-to-day operation, and yeah, what's your plans for the future?
Yeah, thanks, Loic. Well, I think something that quite often typically gets overlooked while preparing for any kind of new GBS projects, to an extent, you know, we're guilty of that too, and I've seen countless projects, you know, of companies doing sort of the same. It's very easy to focus on, you know, cost arbitrage, and whatever we say, it's pretty much every single time it is the first driver. Other factors are very important as well, but let's be honest, you need to have a business case to do some sort of a move, right? But beyond that, something that we've already experienced here in Altradamus, and something that we will be for sure building on in the next couple of years is, and I know this doesn't sound sexy, it's not something, you know, groundbreaking, or it's not going to be, you know, on top of BBC News list or something. It's just good old-fashioned standardization, harmonization of the processes, and as well adapting them to the current needs. So for example, for us, as a financial organization, we're a super highly regulated one, and we are present in almost 50 jurisdictions. We have their own compliance needs and certain regulations, etc., and you have to be mindful of them. We're serving all of them from Lithuania as well, meaning that you need to have, you know, these pockets of specific talent, specific knowledge in order to react to those changes, make sure that you, God forbid, are compliant to everything, and, you know, everything is above the board as well. So building on that standardization, harmonization, it's just so much easier to do in a GBS environment where colleagues from different departments can come together, assess the full spectrum of the process, right? From the very, initial serving that we do to the client, getting the regulators there, getting, you know, mindfulness for our shareholders as well on top of line, and see how the GBS can add additional value add basically to it beyond the typical wage arbitrage due to, let's say, other locations as well. And this is super important as well. And something that I've already touched upon is the really abundance of senior talent in Lithuania. I'm sure the same as in Poland, of people who have done this for other financial organizations who may have gone way before us to do it. So you don't really have to rely on your own internal group knowledge. You can hire people who know how to do it in a compliant way, in a financially prudent way as well, and how to attract and shape that best talent. So I think for us still, this will be for the next couple of years one of the key driving forces. So it's not only, you know, to standardize the process, but also see where once the process is standardized, once you have that design mentality in place while putting new processes in, thinking of how on top we can digitalize, and on top to put AI, support our people, especially on repetitive tasks, on document drafting, things like this that, typically people don't really wake up in the morning and think, I would love to draft some documents, this day. This will be, my purpose for this Monday morning. But how to basically go beyond that, and as I think Giorgio already alluded, how to give that additional creative power to people as well. So I think for not only for Altrodomos, for most of the companies in Lithuania's GBSs and Poland GBSs as well, even in Italy, I'm sure this will be still kind of a key driving force in the future as well, with all of the developments too.
Thank you, Laura. Super interesting, and I will catch some of your words to ask you, Giorgio, next question. Laura talked about design mentality, about digitalization, about AI. To make this happen, you need to have the next talent, the labor ready, to be able to have this design mentality, to be able to implement AI, to be able to use a digital tool and to implement the digitalization within an organization. How do you, at your level, and I've mentioned in the intro that you have two hats, and I think that's interesting that you have these two hats. How do you work with the talent and the future talents to make them ready for this new requirements that organizations are asking?
Yes, thanks for the question. Okay, I mean, in a world where technology is changing so fast, I mean, and you have been mentioning AI, but I mean, we should need to talk about the visual and spatial computing and more, trends that are appearing every year. So when technology changes so fast, we do need to link training with innovation, and otherwise there will be no way for dealing with this request from the market, from the job market. Of course, this calls also for changing the role in the approach from schools and from university. University should become more and more proactive, more and more open to work with companies. I mean, to create and to adapt their syllabus, I mean, their courses to the needs coming from companies, and also working with companies in creating specific training paths, educational paths that can be useful for, solving the lack of talents. What we're doing in Napoli, just to give you an idea, my university is the third largest university in Italy. We are talking about 80,000 students. And to give you an idea, every year, just in my department, that is the Department of Information Technology, we enroll 1,000 new students every year just in computer engineering and computer science. Just to give you an idea of the number that we're talking about. And of course, I mean, we need to work, and we want to work with the companies. Of course, we cooperate in research, long-term research, but we work also on innovation. And we have a new campus on the city where we cooperate with companies mostly in three areas. First of all, we work in knowledge transfer and training, and the Apple Developer Academy is a very good example of it. It's a course in the last 9 months. Every year we accept 400 students from all over the world, mostly from Italy and Europe, but we get students also from the rest of the world. The courses are in English, and it's a course to work on training students on the world of the developing apps. And we have other examples of this sort of cooperation with Accenture on cybersecurity, with Cisco on networking and IoT, and with Deloitte on advanced manufacturing. And in addition to these common training programs, we work also in open innovation project, because again, we need to keep our talents inside the companies, inside our territories. We need to keep them interested in new projects, and innovation is a key factor of that. So we run open innovation project with these companies, and we also create and work to create an ecosystem made of startups and highly innovative small medium enterprises that we bring close to these big companies, and we work together to create opportunities for innovation all over the ecosystem. It is working. Companies are enjoying it. Our students are enjoying it, and we are also looking at many students from abroad that come to study in my university and then decide to settle in Napoli just because they find good job opportunities, nice job, nice project, and a very high quality of life.
No, thank you, Giorgio. Very interesting perspective, and indeed, I think it was interesting as well to show what collaboration between university company could, you can basically take the most of both organization and really create a positive connections in between the university, the ecosystem, the private company. So very interesting takeaway. Thank you, Giorgio. Maybe before we move then to conclusion and maybe question from the list of attendees here. Last question on I mean, kind of same question for you than I asked to Giorgio, for you, Kasia, but more on the HR professional side. So the question on the future skills and future talents, I would say. I know being as well I would say not a professional of HR, but at least a professional of location strategy that always ask for some from some clients around, okay, I need to find a place where I can recruit future skills, which is basically people that you will need for the next 20 years. Even though sometimes we don't really know, what you will need to get in the next 20 years, as Giorgio described. So how do you address this topic at Randstad when the companies come and say, okay, help me to find a place for my future talents,
Of course, first of all, I wanted just to make one comment to what Giorgio said, that what educational institutions are doing is very important, and they need to work closely with the businesses to align skills with their organizational needs. And it's also happening, of course, in Poland. Well, we are also actually facing challenges, right, in Poland, in finding the right competencies. And I'll give you a quick perspective from the HR leaders before I actually cover the future skills in demand. So this is actually quite a global phenomenon, and it's highlighted by our Talent Trends 2024 survey, which I'll be happy to share afterwards, and which reveals that 84% of HR leaders are struggling to find suitable talent. That was a record percentage in the history of the survey. So traditional recruitment approaches based on the education and experience are becoming less effective, and companies are increasingly focusing on the natural potential and professional predispositions of candidates and internal employees. When evaluating both new and senior candidates, the top 3 criteria for employers in Poland would include now critical thinking and emotional intelligence. And 84% of respondents mentioned that this is what they are looking for among new employees, and 88% in relation to senior employees. So soft skills are very important, and also employment experience in an unrelated field or industry, but also potential for upskilling, so potential to learn or grow within organization. And 78% refers to new employees, 84% of respondents mentioned senior candidates, and that's what they are looking for among senior talent. We mentioned about artificial intelligence, and it's becoming an essential tool for identifying needs and competency gaps within organizations. And by analyzing HR and training data, companies can effectively manage their current workforce and define internal mobility opportunities. The usage in Poland when it comes to AI is still relatively limited. However, most of HR leaders are planning to invest in this area to enhance their talent management strategies. Talents in Poland, and I wanted to emphasize this, are opening up to future competencies, especially in large cities, and it's now easier to convince them to reskill, to acquire competencies that align with the company's development path. It's important to build an employer's offer that will be based on skills development, and this can motivate qualified candidates. According to our research, we know that as many as 44% of employees change their employer because of the professional development opportunities offered by another company, and only slightly more than 30% because of the proposed salary or form of employment. So salary, although it's important, is not on the top list, and the development opportunities are very important for Poles. When it comes to the jobs in demands, I will just add the last comment. So with the growing demand for skilled professionals in sectors such as IT, finance, and multilingual customer service roles, Poland still remains a key hub for GBS, and in particular, there is a strong need for IT, of course, and digitalization experts. And I don't think it's just relating to Poland. And I'll mention developers, cloud engineers, and cybersecurity specialists. We've also seen an increase in demand among finance and accounting profiles like R2R, P2P, O2C processes, and FP&A analysts, so more advanced processes. Other sought after roles include HR and business support specialists like payroll and procurement. And as these roles evolve, upskilling will be essential to meet the demand for more advanced competencies and ensure the continued growth of the talent pool.
Thank you, Kasia. And well, I think it's we have still 5 minutes ahead of us. I will obviously make a conclusion, but if some of our attendees are having some questions for our panel or our speakers, please, you can use the chat. Obviously, we still have a few minutes to answer questions. But yeah, so first of all, I would like to thank you, Giorgio. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Kasia, for your time this morning. I think it was a very insightful and interesting conversation, and you brought actually different and complementary views and takeaways. So thank you for that. What we can say, obviously, is that this shared service center and GBS market remains very active in Europe. It's moving very fast. We talked a lot about all of the transformation that these organizations are facing. But the market is as well obviously affected by what's happening in the rest of the world. We talked a bit about geopolitics in Europe, but outside of Europe as well. And obviously, this has an impact on what's happening on the GBS industry in Europe. I would say maybe more and more because what we can see with the uncertainty that Europe is facing on the economic side, that GBS is a way to improve, I would say, cost efficiency, and in the same time increase the value that you deliver in terms of services. So I'm sure it will become more and more important in the coming years. And before I look at the chat for a potential question, as Vincent said in intro, stay tuned, because this was the first episode of this Next Gen Location series focusing on Europe. And as Vincent said, the next one that will be released in Q2 this year will be focusing on a country that we cannot really not speak about these days, is the US. Okay. So thank you, everybody. Let me check if we have... okay, we have one question, actually. So let me know who wants to take it. But the question is around, do you see in the future more multifunctional center or more dedicated center? I assume, okay, based on the need for specific skills on IT or whatever, or do you still see these multifunctional and big centers being the most popular model? I don't know who is inspired by this question.
Let me try it. I mean, I believe that I would go for multifunctional centers rather than dedicated ones, because more and more technology is, an enabling factor that is impacting on several applications. So I'm expecting that with the importance of being very good in practicing a specific technology, and the fact that that technology can be applied from the health area to to public sector, to the defense sector, I would expect, to have, more centers that will be offering a sort of a talent pool that will be available to work on on different domains.
Thank you, Giorgio. Is it something you relate, Laura?
Absolutely, I would love to second Giorgio. There's, as I've talked a little bit before, there's certain advantages of having even relatively remote functions being together. Not only having technology on your side as well, and having the leadership to work on joint processes as well, but overall the end-to-end process ownership. That's super important if you want to get the full value for GBS Center, having more functions based together, working on under single umbrella, under single digital roof, basically, can give you better value for your buck. That's been true, I think, 10 years ago. It's still true today. Might not be relevant to some especially smaller companies that might not be able to reach a certain value, but for the vast majority of the companies that are looking to establish GBS, multifunctional is the way to go.
Laura, yeah, Kasia, you agree? I see you. Yeah.
I actually agree. While specialized centers will continue to grow in areas like IT, AI, and R&D, there will be still a strong demand for multinational centers because of the simple reason these centers can offer flexibility, handling a range of services while adapting to changing business needs.
Thank you. That makes sense. I don't see any more questions. So if there are some, please you can ask them. But if not, I think we are just on time to finish this webinar. So thank you again for attending this webinar, and thank you again, Laura, Giorgio, and Kasia, for bringing your perspective. I think it was of interest for everybody. So thank you for your time.